Good evening and welcome to everyone watching us live on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook. My name is Sunil Kaushal, and this is Weekender on Sunday, the 24th of October, 2021. It's great to have you join us. Thank you for your time. Today's discussion, we've got an excellent panel of four members of parliament today who have given their weekend and long weekend off, so thanks to them in advance. And today's topic is about the team of 4,999,999, or is it 5 million? So we're going to discuss these issues with our four members of parliament. And not only that, but tonight is a big night for the subcontinent. There'll be billions of people watching two neighbors go at each other on the cricket field in UAE for the opener of T20 World Cup between India and Pakistan. And before that, it will be Bangladesh and Sri Lanka playing. So the match between India and Pakistan is at 3 a.m. So thankfully, tomorrow is a long weekend. Who will be the winners of that battle tonight? And we've got one of our existing black cap players, Ajaz Patel, joining us later in the show. But first, we are going to discuss some of the matters that are close to our heart on immigration. As we all know, that Minister Chris Foy on 30th of September announced a one-off 2021 resident visa, which actually brought a lot of joy to about 165,000 migrants who were all set to benefit from this decree. However, it has also saddened about 85,000 people, 85,000 migrants who have been ineligible for the visa just because of the visa category they are holding. Those on partnership-based visa are not eligible for this visa list. And it is really sad to see where are the values of New Zealand, which is known for fairness and for equality. We will be talking to our members of parliament today about this and also answering some of your questions as to how it affects so many people and what can be done and how they will be advocating on your behalf. It's my pleasure now to invite Ricardo Menzies March from the Greens Party, Vanushi Waters from the Labour Party, Dr. James McDowell from the ACT Party, and Erica Stanford from the National Party. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for your time this evening. I'll start out with you, Vanushi. 165,000 people, you must be pleased that the Labour Party has come out with this declaration and benefiting 165,000 people?
Absolutely, Sunil, and thank you for having me on today. It is a huge number, and I don't think we should walk quickly past that because I think people have been celebrating in terms of the difference it makes for them and their families on what are actually very broad criteria. And I don't think we should forget that what this means includes a change for 5,000 healthcare workers, 9,000 primary industry workers, 800 teachers, and many, many others. So it's been a hugely welcome change in terms of the pathway to residence. But I do know, as you mentioned, that of course it doesn't meet everyone's needs. And, I'll be honest, this is an incredibly difficult area of policy to make decisions in. And so what we've seen are criteria that have taken into account the articulated needs of employers, as well as the current work visa status of individuals and their connection to New Zealand. But there are also criteria in the background which frame the context of how we've responded, which
Sure.
is...
I just want to ask Erica. Erica, you would disagree that this could be a vote bank, won't you?
Oh, look, I just find it's just interesting that the government like to congratulate themselves on fixing a problem that they created themselves. Let's not get past the fact that the only reason they had to do this was because they've created such huge queues for so long through poor policy and poor planning. Yes, it's a wonderful thing.
Erica, but
Yeah,
you under national, you changed the rules in 2016, 17.
we did two things. We upped the points at the same time as lowering the amount of residence places. The key factor here is the government didn't do that. They left the points as they were, but decreased the amount of residency places, causing the queue in the first place, which is why we are where we are.
But Sunil, I would disagree in terms, I think that it's been a problem of successive governments in terms of bringing in short-term visas, people on short-term visas without promising them a pathway to anything, which has resulted in many industries where migrant workers aren't treated well at all.
The queues when we left government were 6 to 9 months long. When you created this new pathway, they were nearly 3 years. Now, that is a problem of inviting many, many migrants into the country and not giving them residence. The queues have built up because this government pushed down the number of people.
I'll come back to you, but I want to ask James. James, you worked in the immigration field, but leaving out the partnership visa, where as you can see, we are getting people who are actually in partnership in New Zealand but have been stuck offshore. And families have been separated. Is that right thing to do?
Well, no, it's not the right thing to do. And, as this, I will say that this new resident visa was a very good thing for many people, for sure. It was a result of policy failure. And, we've been saying for a while now, look, we just don't see any other way out of this. Before the announcement, it was, look at the size of the queues, the EOIs going nowhere. It just seemed that there was no other way to actually do this. The worry now is, okay, you've got a hell of a lot of applications that fall into this scheme. So, are you sure you're going to get through them within 12 months? Well, they say 80% of them within 12 months. What's going to happen there? Is he just shifting one problem? Is this whole cleaning house thing just shifting one problem to one side of the room to the other? So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. But then it comes to those who are ineligible. And, this is part of what we do as opposition MPs. We point out that, yes, there's been some good news, but there's actually been a lot of people slipping through the cracks here and not qualifying for this. And actually, they probably should be. One of the situations I tried to raise in the House the other day during question time was around people who, were on work visas here in New Zealand. They've been here for a while. They're committed and all of that. And then because they simply wanted more points one day to apply for the SMC, they went ahead and decided to do a master's degree or something like that. So they had to get a student visa. And they've all been left out. The partners obviously as well. So that was, I think, those that saw that question time moment, and I chucked it on my Facebook page as well, a pretty frustrating response from the minister. I was expecting him to at least address the situations and say, yes, okay, fair enough, that's, I understand that, and give us reasons. But he wouldn't even address it, wouldn't even talk about it.
Ricardo, would you agree that those 85,000 left outside this recent policy have been unfairly dealt with?
Yeah, look, I think that, like James said, many of us have been campaigning for broad pathways to residency, and I think it was a missed opportunity to get the settings right of the one of residency announcement. Look, it is great that we finally got in here, but let's not kid ourselves. I think the announcement was relatively rushed, and I think from what we've heard from immigration advisors and people in the fields and migrant advocates, there was a lack of consultation with the community and those in the field. My hope is that the minister listens to that feedback and tweaks the settings to include those people that have been missed out. So we're talking about people offshore, partners, MIQ workers, and many others, and they should be included, because if what we want to do is bring certainty to migrant workers, the right thing to do would be to bring those people alongside the one of residency announcement.
Wanushi, do you think the ministers, Chris Farfoy and Phil Twyford, for that matter, are listening to the pleas of the immigrants that are stuck offshore also? And is it just that we've got 165 people, which is the size of Hamilton, and that's it?
Yeah, I think we're definitely hearing those concerns. If you're an MP anywhere, then you're getting not only constituents, but people overseas who are describing their connection to New Zealand. Again, I would say this is a hard area to make policy decisions. And what I was going to say earlier, Sunil, is the context in which we're making immigration policy is a COVID context. So there are still rules in terms of coming through MIQ, which limit the places that we have available. And we do have an obligation to ensure that there are places available for New Zealanders coming back home. Now, James also spoke about the processing issues that we've had in the past. The minister said 80% will come through because we're now going online. This is an increase by, I think, 4 to 5 times in terms of the residence applications that we're processing. When we're making immigration policy, we also have to be responsible in terms of how we're doing that and the assurances that we're giving people. The last thing I'd say is the context is also one in which the immigration minister has announced a reset. And the reset of the policy is looking at how we encourage New Zealand industries and businesses to employ and upskill those in New Zealand to take up jobs, how we ensure that industries are paying people fairly and not mistreating migrant workers as well, and how we ensure that we're being responsible because there are on-flow effects from having a big migrant population in the country, housing being one of them. As you know, temporary workers aren't able to buy houses, but permanent residents and citizens are. So there are those on-flow considerations as well. It is about a balance.
Sure. Erica, do you think the government just jumped on the COVID bandwagon and reset this policy?
Well, it's all been very confusing. They had their immigration reset speech in May, which didn't really say anything apart from the fact they wanted immigration, and then the next minute they're doing the exact opposite. So, it's all very confusing. But what I would say to Venushi, saying it's all very hard to make these hard decisions, what we do know is that this was only taken to Cabinet in August. This was a last-minute knee-jerk reaction by pressure from the opposition, the media, because of all the problems they had in immigration. And in their rush, they didn't consult the sector, they didn't consult any stakeholders, and they got it quite wrong. It's very easy to draw a circle and say people in these categories. Actually, as James mentioned, they missed out people like frontline border workers. Now, every other country in the world who's done this has said the first people that we're going to reward are the frontline border workers. We've got PhD students, we've got partners of students who are nurses and doctors and dentists who don't get in. There's a huge missed opportunity here, and it's because the whole thing was rushed. And the other thing I would say, when Venushi tells us that they have this responsibility to make sure that they get it right, we now know that the IT system for having this up and running by December is not going to be in place. So they're going to have to push something together to get these sort of 20 or 30,000 people through in the first instance without the proper IT system that we now know won't be up and running until March. So that again proves that this was last minute rushed decision making because there was no consultation and the IT system will not be up and running. So let's just hope and pray that those people can get their visas.
Yeah, but if you were the immigration minister, Erica, what would you do different?
Well, I'd go back to our policy that we put out in early August. What I would have done is 2 things. Firstly, I would have said essential skills.
Yeah, but you said you put the policy in August when Labour was looking at that. But then again, you said it has been going since March. So why would you wait till August?
We put our policy out in August because it took a long time to have a good think about exactly what we wanted to do. And we saw probably by June, July, the fact that we had this huge, in fact, probably earlier than that, we had this huge skills shortage. And it became very clear to me that we needed to do what we needed to do. I was kind of hoping that the government might be able to do something to get rid of these queues. But the problem got worse and worse and worse to the point where we had to do this. Now, I'll tell you something. This is not the ideal situation. This really is undermining our whole immigration system by doing what we're doing. If we had been processing people's visas in the normal way for the last 3 or 4 years, we wouldn't be here. Nobody wants to be in a situation where we have to rush everybody through without proper process. This is not ideal, but we're forced to be in it. I didn't want to have to write this policy and say, hey, give everyone residence. They should have already got it. That's the point. So we got to August and I thought, actually, let's put this policy out. It's really great that the Labour Party picked it up, but actually they had nowhere else to go because the problem was too big.
Sure. Venushi, do you think that, go on.
I'd respond to that. I mean, I think that Erica has to realise that it has been an unusual 2 years. She might not want to recognise that actually we've been grappling with COVID policies, border policies as well. but we have. And so as a government, what we've done has been responding to that, including creating a bespoke system to allow critical workers and other workers in total 17,000 to respond to the needs in New Zealand. And so it's not that nothing has been done, it's that we've been responding to the crisis as it emerges, and then creating a policy that is thoughtful and responsible to those people who we've been listening to.
Well, two things to that. Firstly, the queues started building up in 2018. That's when they started getting out of control, well before COVID hit. And we also, so COVID is not an excuse. It's not helped things, but it's not an excuse. These queues would still be exactly the same whether it was COVID or not. And the other thing I'd say is about the MIQ workers they're bringing in. It was only this week that they actually set aside MIQ space for critical healthcare workers. The first time in 18 months. And
okay, Ricardo, I'll come to you. Do you think our immigration system is broken, especially from a humanitarian values point of view? And then, Vanushi, I'll get you to answer that because you're a humanitarian activist, human rights activist. Go, Ricardo.
Yeah, yes, it is. And I think we have evidence, and even the government's own officials have told us that some of the people who have been excluded by this announcement are the ones that are already more vulnerable to exploitation. And look, I totally take Vanushi's comments about there's flow-on effects if we expand the criteria. But let's also be real that the people who we're talking about, most of them are low-income workers. They're people who are still students. They're not people who are just going to be able to go and buy a house as soon as they get the residency, right? And so to me, if we want to address issues of exploitation, one of the things that we know is that by granting people residency, we also create the conditions where they can improve working conditions. So the right thing to do is to expand the criteria. And I don't want to go into the blame game of who created the problem. The truth is, we're landed here. We've got this problem to fix, and the right answer would be to expand the criteria.
So, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that we need a reset. I do agree that we need a reset. As I said before, I do think it's been a pattern of successive governments to bring in short-term...
What do you say? Define reset for me. Define reset for me.
I think we need to look at what's sustainable in the country. We need to look at the rights of migrant workers and ensure that they're protected, as Ricardo has said. I think we need to look at what the mid to long-term skills need for New Zealand is. I think we need to look at housing supply as well. So the balance across all of them needs to be appropriate, as well as what the level of the short-term workforce is that we can sustain. So I do agree there needs to be a reset there. You talked about my background in human rights and the humanitarian approach. I think there have been a lot of really good responses that the government has put in place, including increasing the refugee quota, which has been significant in terms of our human rights response. There have been others while we've been in crisis mode, where we've responded to the crisis in Afghanistan by granting over 1,200 critical purpose visas to individuals to come to New Zealand as well. And we've also made some changes in terms of how asylum policy is considered and reviewed in New Zealand. There's currently a review of the detention of asylum seekers as well. So there is a theme in terms of recognising that immigration law and immigration policy needs to have embedded within it a human rights approach, and part of that should be a responsible reset.
Sure. James, I know of a lot of people, and one in particular who only got married and then he had to come back while his wife applied. And, God bless them. They were blessed with a child, but the guy hasn't seen his wife or his newborn baby for 2 years. Now, some would argue this is against human rights. What is the government doing? So what would your answer be to someone, a father who's separated? I've got 4 kids, and I can't, 1 week is too long for me. But imagine a father, missing out on the birth of this child, let alone his first words or his steps. Where's the humanness in there? Where's humanity in there?
Well, there hasn't been a lot of humanity in immigration policy recently, and that side of things, does come back to the border issue. But I think, look, and there's a lot of situations where people should have their visas processed if they're partners. So if the person, if the father in the situation is here in New Zealand, they should process their visas offshore. They should grant them residency, and they should bring them over. Obviously, there'll be a bit of a time delay with MIQ and all the rest, but they should get at least something underway. And that also kind of extends into the split migrant family issue with the 2021 resident visa. One thing that I think most of us have called for is to say, look, once somebody applies, when they get that chance to, at least in that situation, at least let them go offshore to reunite with their families while it's processing. Don't actually just stop processing the residency as soon as they leave New Zealand. And that way they can head offshore and they know that they have a bit of certainty, hopefully, that they can come back with the whole family because they'll be included in the application. So there hasn't been a lot of humanity. I think one of the bigger issues I have, my colleague from across the side of the house there is saying around, constantly talking about immigration problems as an MIQ problem, as a COVID problem. And the vast majority of the issues we've been talking about around residency, around work visas, and you name it, it's not a COVID problem at all. It's not a border problem at all. These people already live here in New Zealand. And we just need to make sure that we actually focus on them and not use excuses for a stalled immigration system. It's absolutely bizarre. I think in terms of what I would do differently, if I can sneak in an answer into that question, was directed at Erica before. Look, I think the immigration system is just totally overcomplicated. And I've interacted with the system for years, and it's incredibly complicated, far more than it needs to be. The skilled migrant category, well, first of all, basically I would just expand the eligibility so that we can grant more people residency and get that done in a timely manner. Certainly I would go after the health requirements and simplify those. And in terms of work visas, no longer decouple them to jobs. I mean, there's so much migrant abuse that can crop up in those situations. And the skilled migrant category, look, most immigration lawyers I talk to and industry people just say, look, let's just scrap it and start again. Let's do something different. It may be beyond repair at this point. Let's just get them residency right now, sort that out, and process them even faster than what they're promising, and then sort out SMC. So a whole lot of things I would do, but yeah, the situation is broken and COVID is not an excuse.
I see you agreeing, Ricardo. Would you grant residency to the frontline, hardworking people who put their lives on risk during COVID while we were at home? And they chose New Zealand for a better place. They have gone and reskilled themselves, right? Reskilled themselves. That means paid another international fees. Yet when the 30th of September came, the visa category changed and they've missed out. Is that fair? Would you grant them?
Yeah, and I think, look, what I don't want to get into is this sort of thing of, well, look, we're going to have this immigration reset, so just watch this phase. The truth is that in the present, we've got people's livelihoods that are at stake, and we should expand the eligibility criteria, include as many people as we can who are already here. And then, yeah, sure, if the government wants to look at our future settings, let's do that, but let's not leave people's livelihoods hanging while the government makes these decisions. I mean, who knows what the immigration reset may look like? They could end up moving the goalpost so far away that many people won't qualify any longer. So in recognition that this is supposed to be a historic announcement to address scarcity and also uncertainty, let's get it right. Once again, I know the minister has been saying that he won't be looking at reviewing this issue, but like with many other issues, he used to say, look, I'm not going to change things on the health requirements, and he's now reviewing them actively. So my hope is that with the continuous pressure of the community, we can get him to see the very big gaps that still exist. And, I think all of us are here because we want the best for our communities, not to sort of do political point scoring. So again, I hope the minister is listening to this feedback, and rather than having a knee-jerk response, is thinking, how can I make sure this policy works for the community?
Manushi, I've just got a question here on the chat from my viewer. Says that I think the minister needs to give us clear answers and solutions, and not other pathways, because we have been paying taxes while we are separated, and we are earning and paying locally in New Zealand. How do you answer that person who's separated from a partner and cannot apply under the partnership visa?
Yeah, I mean, so I've heard the Minister's response in the House as well to Mr McDowell's question, and I think what he has said there is that it will be open to people to apply once we have gone through the reset process, but for the time being, the priority is to get these applications through the pipeline. As I said earlier, it is an increase by 4 to 5 times the number of residence applications that have been processed. So there will be a strong push in terms of getting those through the pipeline. For those people who are studying to become what would be critical workers who do graduate before that mid-year deadline next year, it's potential that they would fall within this criteria as well. I do hear the argument that for those who won't, that there is a grayer space in terms of what comes next for them, and them being able to apply and have an assurance that they'll get through the pipeline as well. But again, the priority has to be at this stage pushing those 165 through the process.
Erica, do you think there should be exemptions for MIQ and maybe MIQ at home for those who have been separated during this COVID thing if there's not enough spaces in MIQ?
Yes, in one word. We've actually been, obviously, I've been pushing for this for a long time, especially when there were, numbers of rooms available in MIQ at the beginning of the year. We sort of had 7,000 rooms, more than that actually, 9,000 rooms we didn't use, could have used for split migrant families. What we've said, and I think the other parties, to be fair, both Greens and Active also called for, is to say that the split migrant families should be included in the first tranche of these visas in December rather than having to wait till March. Because if you think about it logically, by the time they put their application in March, get their residents and get their partners and children here, it will have been 3 years since they've seen their children. And it's not, we talk about all this humanitarian kindness rubbish that the government, talk about, but then do nothing about. It doesn't fit. These guys haven't seen their families and their children for 2 years. They need to be prioritised. And what we've also said is that if they're coming from low-risk countries, they're double vaxxed, they've had their negative tests before they left on arrival, why shouldn't they be allowed to isolate at home, being monitored, electronically monitored? It makes sense. So if anyone coming in, these guys are the ones who are the lowest risk because they haven't seen their families for so long. They will do nothing to put that at risk. But what I also say, going back to the government's claim of the fact that they take humanitarian concerns seriously. Last week in the Education Select Committee, we we put forward an inquiry into the split migrant family issue and other border issues that have caused angst for migrants. And the Labour Party members voted that down. They don't want to hear from split migrants, hear from partners.
Sure. Vanusi,
Can I just respond to that, Sunil? Because I understand that will be on the agenda of the Select Committee for February. It's a question of the workload of the committee and on the workload of the committee for the start of next year.
But Vanusi, we've got a humanitarian crisis here. So are we not? I mean, these are lives we are talking about. Look, Vanusi, when we were in the lockdown last year, when COVID hit us, you like it or not, but the students were given full working rights, and they worked their butt off to protect us. They worked in the front line to save us. And imagine, if you're a student and your family is overseas, how dangerous it would be. And, thank God there was no disaster. But, how are we rewarding them? Just because they fall in a different category? And if the Select Committee comes in February, there's like 4 or 5 months. Are we going to put them in limbo? Sorry, carry on.
I completely agree that, it is incredibly hard. And again, I've spoken to a number of these students as well. What we haven't spoken about, Sunil, tonight is the ongoing, the implications of that on housing. What we haven't talked about is ensuring that those who are here in New Zealand are welcomed into the workforce and are invested in. What we know is that about 17% of New Zealand are looking for additional work as well. So it is a balance across all those themes. And I go back to that point I made about COVID as well being a factor. It is a factor. I think it's it's really odd to say that it's not, when a lot does depend on being able to bring people safely into the country. And I was really heartened to see the Minister talking in August about the way in which we're going to reconnect New Zealand to the world. And I mean, Eric has mentioned some of the criteria and categories that would be relevant to that, in terms of an increased vax rate in New Zealand, having increased vax rates overseas, but then also having certificates that are recognised across borders. So that all needs to be done well, so that we don't see a big spread of cases in New Zealand and ICUs who aren't able to cope with it. We've always believed that the best mid to long-term response is focusing on a strong and robust public health response. And I think when you compare our response to other countries around the world, you'll see that that's what we've done. So our ability to reconnect with the rest of the world will come, but it remains our focus to have a strong public health response first.
Sure. James, do you think, I mean, I think Vanushi has got a point there, that we need a balance in the immigration and that we don't overflow the system. And with 165,000, the size of your Hamilton, new population, new things, infrastructure. It's not to say that it's not already there, because these people are already here. But would you agree with what Vanushi is saying, that there needs to be a balance?
Oh, look. And I'll reiterate something that you pointed out. Of course, the 165 are already here, and it's just a case of clarifying their status. Look, in future, certainly there has to be an idea, some sort of numbers in terms of how many we actually want to have residency here. But I'm of the mind that I'm not particularly worried about it. I think immigration policy can be flexible enough as it goes. I don't think targets need to be set. So I just don't tend to set targets around this. And it would have been meaningless in the last 3 years anyway. One thing I'd like to just come back on, and again, we've been speaking about this, and it goes back to the questions I asked in the House. And it's this idea that those that missed out on 2021 resident visa, those that were unfortunate enough, even though they have very good cases and dedicated to New Zealand, but they've missed out. It's this sort of weak excuse that there'll be another pathway for them, that eventually they'll get residency the normal way or something like that. But the minister's not going to tell us what that's going to look like. Is he talking about the skilled migrant category? I presume so, because there aren't any other good pathways. But what's it going to, is the minister seriously saying that, these people should qualify for the SMC come July 2022? I highly doubt it. So it's very misleading, just as misleading when they were advertising, become a student in New Zealand, that's a pathway to residency. And clearly the most recent announcement made it clear that it isn't.
Erica, I'll come back to you, but I want to put a question to Ricardo. Ricardo, do you think those students on the front line who worked 40 hours and more during COVID should be given residency and should be included in this?
Look, I mean, we told our students, please go work in our supermarkets and put yourself at the front lines. And so, why are we excluding students just because they're in the wrong visa? And to go back to what Vanushi was saying, look, I think it's disappointing to see sort of this scapegoating of saying, look, if we expand the eligibility criteria, the housing crisis is going to get worse, or that we're really going to affect, New Zealand citizens' ability to be fully employed. Those policies are addressed by ensuring that we're creating good jobs. And again, if we granted residency to those workers, particularly those in precarious work, what we are doing is lifting the standards of employment for all people here. So I just really want to reject the sort of scapegoating narrative around the balance. These are people who are already here. We can have conversation all day long about future border settings, but people who are here and those who have been trapped offshore as well as split migrant families, those people deserve certainty. They shouldn't be victims of a pandemic that nobody asked for.
Sure. Erica, what would you like to see happen in the reset that the immigration minister has announced or would be announcing? What would you like to see happen?
Well, the first thing I would have said is that the immigration reset should have happened at the same time as this R21 visa. The reason that we've got all of these problems of all of these groups saying, why wasn't I included? I'm a PhD student, or I'm a frontline worker. The reason this has all come up is because they've got no pathway to residence. They've got no future. Some of them are sitting in the EOI pool. They don't qualify. They've been sitting there for 2 or 3 years. Now they're looking at another year, and then who knows how long it'll take. I've got no confidence, and I wouldn't, in this minister with all the queues created. So what I would have done differently, said at the same time as issuing the R21 visa, is said, look, because there's always going to be a line in the sand. There's always going to be people who miss out. What he should have done is said, right, at the same time, here is our new reset, here are the new guidelines, here is what we need to do. For all of you who missed out, here is your pathway, and here are the timeframes for it, so that they knew that they had a pathway, because all they're doing, all this minister has done, is auto-extended for another 12 months, possibly longer, the angst, anxiety, and depression of these people who've got no idea about their future. All they want is certainty. Well, he should have done it at the same time, and then people would have known what their pathway was. And if they didn't have a pathway, then they would have had choices to make. But he didn't do that. He's just gone, well, wait and see. Good luck next year. Maybe we'll want you. Maybe we won't.
Thanks. Varushi, there's a question here. They say that Labour has become heartless.
I don't think that's true. I think making responsible immigration policy requires that we're considering multiple factors. And again, I don't think it's been an ordinary last 2 years. I think we're making immigration policy in the context of what is a very, very different world than it was 2 years ago. And as I pointed to earlier, there are some strong themes about how we respond to crises internationally, how we respond to how we're processing asylum seeking claims here, but also with the recent announcement, I think again we shouldn't skip over the 165,000 people to whom the announcement is going to make a huge, huge difference to.
Sure. Ricardo, do you think there would be some light at the end of the tunnel for those who are stuck, 85,000 people here and offshore?
Look, the only thing that is certain is that things won't change if we don't continue putting that pressure. And so, as I'm sure many others will, we will continue putting pressure to expand the eligibility criteria. And again, like, nobody is saying that the one-off residency wasn't welcomed. And I think we are all glad that, tens of thousands of people will get some level of certainty. But I don't think this is what we're here to discuss. The truth is that many people have been left out, and we're getting that massive feedback. Again, this is a historic opportunity to get it right. Let's not, I think, border on almost gaslighting the people who are raising those concerns to us that they've been excluded, and the experts who are telling us that there are pathways to make sure they're included. And then we can have all that conversation about what we want our future settings to look like. Like, I'm calling on the minister to urgently meet with the community groups, with experts on this field, and look for a pathway for them to be brought on to this one-off residency program, or at least to provide a pathway, like Erica said, about what their future in Aotearoa will look like as we reset our immigration system. It's not fair to just continue extending some of their visas, for example, for working holiday visa 6 months at a time, and not tell them, look, we want you to go home after a year, or hey, look, we really value the work you're doing. We know you've been exploited, and some of you in some of these industries. Let's bring you here permanently and look for a way to better care for all of us.
Yeah. Erica, do you think that the student debacle, those who haven't got visas, who are currently doing their PhD, etc., will that be bad news for our education sector, thinking that we are going to open about 1,000 spaces next year for international students? Will that be a negative effect for us?
Excluding the PhD students in this R21 visa, I think, has been a massive mistake. I've been talking to them, and we're about to do a few things to bring this to the minister's attention. It will have an impact on our international reputation when it comes to our international education, because it is word of mouth about, hey, come and study in New Zealand, it's great. These PhD students feel extremely let down. Most of them are working full-time as well as studying. They're doing some incredible things. We want them to stay here. I don't know why or on what planet the minister lives on to think that we don't want to ask these amazing, amazing people who are doing world-changing things in some cases to stay here. And a lot of them are looking at leaving because they're just so fed up and so, with New Zealand's, stringing them along, and they've got no pathway to residence right now. So, I think it is having a huge impact on our reputation.
Sure. Look, thank you so much to all of you for your time today. But just before we go, I just want each of you to say one thing that you would say to all the viewers, and especially those 85,000 odd who are stuck. A message that you may have, and I'll start off with you, Ricardo. If there's one thing you would want them to hear.
Yeah, look, keep the pressure coming. Keep your feedback and your stories coming. It's needed more than ever, and we'll be making sure to take that into the halls of power. Kia kaha and stay strong.
Are you saying that you would advocate on their behalf?
Absolutely, yes. We have been, many of us in this call for many months.
Sure. James?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I would say, I agree with everything Ricardo said. I'd always just say, look, don't give up. Because there's always light at the end of the tunnel if we keep the pressure on this minister and this government, and we can get some positive stuff here. So don't give up.
Sure. Thanks. Erica?
Yeah, well, look, I'd reiterate what the others have said. We've had some pretty big policy wins, the three of us, by putting pressure on this minister, and we're continuing to do so. There are some groups who were missed out who absolutely should not have been, and I will be able to really strongly on their behalf. I've already done some work with the border workers. I'm doing some work with PhD students, and I'll continue to put the pressure on this minister because I think there will be some backflips. I'm sure of it.
Thanks very much. And Wanushi, last not the least, but thanks.
Yeah, I think we've heard from the minister that some really difficult lines have had to be drawn in terms of this pathway to residence, but we've also have continued to hear the concerns that students, that partners of students, that others have brought up with us, either directly in conversation or through emails. So I do agree with my colleagues that if you do have concerns, if you have suggestions and proposals, you should continue to talk to us. And I, as I know my colleagues will be, are certainly still continuing to listen.
Thank you so much, Wanusi, Erica, James, and Ricardo, for your time today. It's been great discussions. And to all the viewers who have joined us, thank you very much for your questions. I know it's hard to have all the questions answered, but we hope that some of the questions have been answered. But surely, in the not near future, we will be having Immigration New Zealand also come and join us. So thank you so much to all the members of Parliament for giving their Sunday up, and we will see you shortly. Thanks very much. Have a good evening. And to our viewers now, we'll just have a quick break, and then we are going on to another great discussion for the evening. See you soon. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are and whatever part of the world you are. Thank you for joining us again on weekend or on Sunday, 24th of October. My name is Sunil Kaushal. Great to have you join us. Now, moving from something totally different from immigration, tonight, the battle for T20 Cricket World Cup really starts. It started yesterday. With a great match between Australia and South Africa, but a dismal performance by the world champions of T20 cricket currently, West Indies against England. It was hardly worth watching. But tonight is going to be the battle of the borders or the subcontinent. We see Sri Lanka take Bangladesh, and then at 3 o'clock, the hearts of billions of people will stop when two neighboring countries take on the cricket pitch in UAE, India and Pakistan. And someone who has actually played there and has been the star of the recent years is Ajaz Patel. He's now joined through our video link here in New Zealand. Welcome to the show, Ajaz.
Hi, Sunil. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. So people would like to know, you came out from nowhere. I read somewhere that 1 minute you were sitting and eating with 30 people, and the next minute you get a phone call from Gavin Larson. What's that about?
Yeah, it was a funny one. I guess I was quite fortunate, and unfortunately for other people, that there was an injury. So I got an opportunity after being quite successful in the domestic team. And that's kind of how I got my first call from Gavin, which was awesome, because at the time I didn't really believe him, because I wasn't 100% sure that it was actually happening. But yeah, that night I was having dinner with the family, and when I told everyone, they were pretty ecstatic, and it was a madhouse for a little bit, so it was pretty cool.
Oh, that's great to hear. So who is Ajaz Patel? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
For me, obviously, I'm an immigrant. I've moved over from Mumbai, India, and we've been living in Auckland ever since. I guess my cricketing journey didn't really start that early. For me, representative cricket probably started at about under 17s, under 19s. That was when it really started taking off. But at the time, I was a fast bowler, so I changed from that to spin bowling, and I've been playing my cricket domestically for Central Districts in the Central North Island, and then from there, obviously, got the opportunities to play for New Zealand.
So from a fast bowler to spin bowler, where you batted all around the place, so you thought, I'll do spin now?
No, it wasn't so much that. It was more just the opportunities weren't really coming to progress further, and for me, I realised that I still wanted to pursue cricket and had a passion for it. So I knew if I wanted to get further, I had to do something different, and that was something that I felt I was capable of doing, and so I gave it a try, and I'm lucky to be sitting here today and having played for New Zealand, becoming a spinner, and I probably wouldn't have got there if I'd continued pursuing fast bowling.
Tell me one thing. Did you subconsciously, thinking that you are of Indian descent, turn into spin bowling, thinking maybe because I'm Indian, I can do the batta bowling or something like that?
Not so much. For me, it was as a fast bowler, you tend to you can only go for so long during a training before you start to tire out. So what used to happen was after training, I used to bowl a little bit of spin to the batsman, so they still were facing someone. And I had a few coaches that told me that if I ever wanted to give something else a go, I should think about spin bowling. And when the time came, I started thinking about it, and it didn't sound as foreign as I thought it would, although I loved fast bowling. So it was a reluctant change, but something I had to make in order to get further in my career.
Sure. And I see your buddy Jeet Raval. Did he give you a hard time when you were bowling fast paces to him, or?
No, not really. Like we've played a lot of cricket together. We played through Avondale College, then played at Suburbs New Lynn, and I've been very fortunate that I've in my milestones throughout my career, he's been a part of. So it's been a special relationship with him. Since he arrived from India, we've been very close friends, and so to be able to share that journey with him was quite special. And to debut while he was out there playing with me was something that I'll never forget and cherish for a long time.
Sure. Most people will say, will say all of a sudden you went off to Sharjah and there you are, your first debut match, and you get a man of the match.
Yeah, Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I know the work that I put in the background, and I know how long I waited to get that opportunity, how much I dreamt of that opportunity and that chance. And I guess for me, it was about, when that opportunity came, just enjoying it. I guess I was fortunate that everything else kind of, worked out the way that it did and the results went my way. But for me, it was just special to be debuting for New Zealand, to have, my own test cap and my own test number. And that felt like an accomplishment on its own. But to actually perform and win such a tight game for New Zealand, that was something that's very, very special to me. and probably something that I'll hold in high stead right throughout my career.
Sure. So here is the thing, and we know that tonight, the battle of the bridges in Auckland Harbour or something like that, but it's the battle of the borders tonight, right? But you, as someone of Indian descent, playing against the Pakistanis, basically on their, back turf. How was it in the middle? Did you get Did you get sledged? Did you have this subconscious fear? How did you mentally prepare that I'm a Kiwi of Indian descent? I'm playing Pakistanis. Did it give you some extra zing to?
I mean, yes, obviously it's one of the biggest rivalries when it comes to cricket and sport. But I guess for me, I was still representing New Zealand, even though I am very much of Indian origin. And to be honest, I felt somewhat a little bit more comfortable playing against them because, you can understand the language, you can understand the culture and where they come from and their background and also their conditions and their passion for the game. So it was quite an exciting time for me. But also, to be honest, they're all really friendly guys, and they are very highly competitive. And that's the nature of international cricket. Yes, things get aggressive sometimes, and other times you walk off and you have a conversation and have a laugh. But it was quite a cool game to play in, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the opportunities that I've had to play not only Pakistan but also India because it's something that resonates quite highly with my upbringing and my culture and the language and everything like that. So it's always an exciting time playing a team from the subcontinent. But still obviously representing New Zealand.
So what was it like playing against India? I mean, tell me about your feelings, surely every time we go back to India, it's a totally different feeling. You feel like crying, you feel like, ecstatic and memories come back. So what was it for you as a Black Caps, basically representing a nation that you have taken on, playing against the nation you were born in?
Yeah, for me, it was quite special, and I felt quite fortunate to have the opportunity to play against India. They're a powerhouse in world cricket at the moment, and so for me to be able to go up against them and compete with them was a special opportunity. And we know how good the Indian cricket team is, and we know how competitive they are on a world stage. So for me, it was about being able to challenge my skills against some of the best in the world, and it made it more special knowing. Obviously, I come from Mumbai. I've got lots of family in Mumbai, and I've been to Mumbai numerous amount of times, and I love everything about India. But obviously, playing against them was extra special because it was kind of like, well, I grew up there when I was a youngster, and you see the amount of passion there is in the game in India. But here I am, an Indian boy playing for New Zealand and getting to go up against a lot of heroes of Indian cricket. So. It is special, and every time that opportunity does come, it is something that gives me a little bit more of an edge to kind of say, look, I really need to make sure I perform here and put my best foot forward. But yeah, it's always exciting playing against India.
Did you, when you were bowling to them, in the back of your mind, did you feel like, hopefully it doesn't go for a 4, my first ball or something like that?
No, I think as an international cricketer, I think you can't afford to worry about that. Sometimes you do get hit for a 4. I remember my T20 debut. I got hit for a 4 on the first ball, and
that's right.
And sometimes
I didn't want to bring that up just in case.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things. In international cricket, you have to be prepared for anything. And as a bowler, I guess you're fortunate that you have the opportunity to come back and really stamp your mark. Whereas as a batsman, you get that one life and one opportunity, and you're kind of living by your sword. But I think you have to be brave. You have to be willing to go for boundaries and actually have the confidence in your skills and back yourself to be able to do what you need to do on the day. And sometimes you will come up against some very good players.
Now, there'll be a lot of kids watching this, a lot of parents with kids watching and hoping, just like the ANZ ad that's with little Samir, which is my friend's son,
Yeah.
and hoping that their son will be someone like Deepak Patel or Rajesh Patel. What sort of encouragement would you give to them? Because obviously they would be looking up to someone like you who can break the glass ceiling, and be there. You came at 11. You started playing later on, from fast bowling to spin bowling. On your first debut, you made man of the match. You brought a lot of joy to Black Caps and to the Kiwis, to the Kiwi Indian community. What's your word of advice for them?
Well, firstly, I think that ad very much resonates with me because, it's very much my story in cricket as well. I guess the challenges that you come up against and the adversity that you face, I think you have to kind of push through that. And one of the biggest things for me was the support that I had at home. My parents really made it very, very easy for me to follow my passion. At the same time, I thoroughly enjoyed the game. I always made sure that I was enjoying it, and my parents always made sure that I was enjoying it. So I think because I was doing that, I was more passionate about continuing to do it for long periods and working hard and having that hard work ethic to kind of pursue that. And I mean, even now I go down to the clubhouse at Suburbs New Lynn, and you see a lot of youngsters out there training with their parents. And, a lot of it was really what for me it was all about. So I think as kids, you just want to make sure that your work ethic is second to none. You're working harder than anyone else. There's going to be lots of people working hard, but you just got to make sure that you're putting in the extra work. And I think the role of parents is very, very important in being able to progress. I think parents need to be very, very supportive. And sometimes, actually, a lot of the times, they're making a lot of the sacrifices for you, especially when you're young. Taking you to trainings, dropping you off, and as players, I guess we gotta appreciate that as well and understand that we're not in this journey alone. Our parents are definitely on the road with us. So yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is hard work, and the support at home, and also having the right guidance along the way. Make sure you've got good coaches and people you really trust, and you take their advice for gospel. So yeah, those are probably the main things.
Okay, now over to T20 cricket. What's the Black Caps' chances?
I think I know that we're definitely underdogs. I think a lot.
Why do you think so?
I think a lot of the time when you look at international teams, people would say that New Zealand cricket don't have the same kind of firepower that someone like West Indies or India or Pakistan have. But I think as a player, I know a lot of the players that we have in this environment, if they have their time and if they are informed during this tournament, they can be very, very lethal. So I think New Zealand has always looked as an underdog. I think even though we've in recent times achieved some amazing things, I think every time we do, people see it as kind of a surprise. But I think us as a nation now, I think we're starting to really respect international cricket and what we've been able to achieve. So I think we've got a better chance than probably most people think. I definitely think that we deserve to be in that final already. Very patriotic, but it's. I firmly believe that we have a very good chance of making that final.
And the most difficult question of the night, at 3 a.m., when billions of people will be glued, probably yourself and myself. What do you think who's got the edge to win India?
If I'm honest, it's a double-edged sword, really. If you look at the conditions, Pakistan has played a lot of cricket in the UAE. You'd almost call it their home venue, and they know exactly what the pitches are going to do and what the surfaces are going to be like. But on the flip side, we've got India, who are such a strong powerhouse in international cricket with some amazing talent and amazing players. So in recent times, Pakistan has done very well in T20 cricket, and so has India. So I think this rivalry, obviously, it goes back a long, long way. And, this game for me, watching on today, is probably the most evenly poised that I've kind of seen it in all the challenges that India and Pakistan have had. And so I think it's going to be a very, very good game to watch, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, you didn't give me a prediction, mate. That's what I was after.
No, I can't. I can't. It's too tight for me to call. Obviously,
Will it be a high-scoring game or a low-scoring game? Given the pitch you played on.
Where are they playing?
I think they're playing in Sharjah.
Oh, Sharjah. If they're playing in Sharjah, it's a very small ground, so it is pretty likely that it would be a high-scoring game. But once again, with those conditions over there, it really depends on the surface, what kind of surface is presented to them. And I think either way, regardless of whether if it's a good surface and it's a high-scoring game, or if it's a slow surface and it's a low-scoring game, I think we're going to see a very tight game. And obviously, the added pressure of it being an India-Pakistan game is definitely going to weigh in on both the teams. So yeah, it'll be exciting. I'm glad I get to watch and not play.
What about Sri Lanka, Bangladesh?
I think Sri Lanka on that one. I think Sri Lanka have something unique about them. I mean, they're dynamic in the field. They're very astute batsmen in those conditions as well. But at the same time, obviously Bangladesh have got some key players. So in Shakib and Mahmudullah and Mustafizur Rahman, who are very, very good T20 players. But I think overall, as a full unit, I think Sri Lanka have a bit more of an edge in that contest, and they've already played some cricket, both teams, and so that I think both teams will have a better idea of what the conditions are going to be like and what to expect. So I think it's going to be pretty cool.
Sure. And who's your favorite player out of the T20 teams?
Currently?
Yes.
Good question. I see. The problem is both my bowling idols are long into retirement now. Well, I wouldn't say long, but they're a few years into retirement now. So I guess as a left-arm spinner, I'll definitely be egging on Mitchell Satner and see how he goes in those conditions. So
and the player you would not dread to bowl even in your dreams?
Well, I guess I'm lucky I play against one of them in Kane Williamson. Oh, sorry, I play with one of them in Kane Williamson. And I think the other two that I wouldn't really enjoy bowling to at the moment in world cricket are probably Babar Azam and Virat Kohli. We know both of them are amazing T20 players, and their track records in ICC tournaments is also pretty good. So I guess both of them right now are powerhouses as well. So it would be pretty exciting to bowl to them, also at the same time pretty daunting.
Sure. Thank you so much for your time, Ajaz Patel, Black Caps player, who doesn't want to call the winning team between India and Pakistan, but we give him the benefit of doubt. But he does think that the Black Caps would make it to the final, and fingers crossed they can add that trophy to the cabinet because I think we deserve it. So thank you so much for your time, Ajaz, and have a lovely night. And thank you for joining us.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Good night. And to all our viewers, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We had a great debate on the immigration team of 4,999,999. That one person that's missing, the 85,000 people who are on in limbo at the moment. So thank you so much for all your questions, for all your encouragement, and for participating and viewing this special edition today. My name is Sunil Kaushal. I'm your host. Make sure that you keep in touch with your family and your parents. Say hello to them, and make sure, if you are a cricket follower, to watch the India-Pakistan game tonight, and also Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Have a lovely night, and we'll catch up with you next week. Good night.